Hello, welcome back to my channel this week on the countdown for the top 100 albums of the 21st century. Once again, joined by John Stanek over here as we go over albums 80 through 71. Kind of hard to believe we're this far in. Maybe not, but it feels like we just started and we should be in week 2. I don't know about you, but that's just how I feel.
Yeah, it's going fast, man. Fast and furious, which we may get a little furious on this episode. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm just going to go ahead and say, like, there's not a lot of stuff that I personally loved on this episode, but I'll leave it at that. We'll see what happens.
I might agree with you in some way, but yeah, let's find out why that may be the case. Starting with number 80. Dawn FM by The Weeknd from 2022. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad this album made the list. This was pretty much higher on my list at number 50, or around above 50. But this, I think, is The Weeknd's best record far and away. And I think a lot of that has to do with how conceptual this album is. I mean, really, I don't think The Weeknd up to this point. I mean, there's so many great tracks, so many bangers in his catalog, especially off of Beauty Behind the Madness. But I don't think there was ever an album that I truly loved. It was more like the singles from The Weeknd. But this was the first time where I really felt this cohesive creative vision coming from him, utilizing a lot of city pop samples, and you can certainly see the influence of Michael Jackson, Prince, and Daft Punk, especially Michael Jackson and Daft Punk. It's honestly, you can't miss it, but he creates it in his own sort of way. It reminds me of the Who Sell Out in a lot of ways, how he kind of creates this like radio station that, with Jim Carrey being the DJ, kind of guiding you through The Weeknd's owned emotional purgatory in a sense. And that's why I feel like this album is so cohesive. Granted, at first it takes a little bit to get into because some of the tracks are kind of generic at the beginning, but my goodness, once you get to Take My Breath, with just
That's a
that
great one. That's my
oh my
favorite.
goodness, I
Yeah.
don't blame you, man. I think it also is one of The Weeknd's best song, with just that
Mhm.
propulsive beat underneath that boom, 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 and then he comes in, take my breath, and it's just like
Yeah.
so amazing.
Such
It's
a good
so
hook.
hooky.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and just the techno vocal samples that are very reminiscent of Daft Punk that are going on throughout that song. It's just amazing. The panning, everything about the production on here. That's another thing about The Weeknd. I've always loved the production on his albums, and I think this
Hmm.
is like just kicks it up another notch. But once you get to A Tale by Quincy, which is very similar to Giorgio by Moroder off of Random Access Memories, but this time it's Quincy Jones talking about kind of like his, I guess, commitment issues, not having his mother in his life, and just over this really jazzy, beautiful, beautiful instrumental that segues perfectly into what I think is The Weeknd's best song, Out of Time, with that amazing city pop sample coming in at the beginning. Oh my goodness, what an amazing hook about regret for this relationship that he kind of basically threw away. And and I just love when he says, if he mess up just a little, then come right back, girl, come right back, even though he knows that he's out of time.
Hmm.
And just the way that segues into Here We Go Again, which the chord progression on this song blows my damn mind. Which actually, believe it or not, was from a jamming session with Bruce Johnson from the Beach Boys. So he has a songwriting credit on here. But just Abel's voice, my goodness, it's just one of the best singers ever. I mean, his falsetto, his high range, everything about it
It's the closest
is.
thing to a modern day Michael Jackson,
Yeah,
I
and,
think.
and it's
Yeah.
like, even though the comparisons are very obvious,
Hmm.
he's still so, like, you listen to him and that's The Weeknd when you
Yeah.
hear him. He has such a distinctive voice, and of course Tyler the Creator's verse on there too is amazing. But I just really think this whole album exploring kind of like, his regret in these relationships gone wrong, essentially. I just really think it's one of the best records from the past few years, probably one of my favorites of the decade so far. And I think The Weeknd is a handful of those mainstream artists that really deserves the hype. And I also, there's so many great songs on this. Have Don't Break My Heart, even the Lil Wayne one.
Mhm.
I'm not huge on Lil Wayne feature, but I still love the song because the hook's so strong, and so is the theme. And Less Than Zero as well is one of his most self-deprecating songs, and very, very heartbreaking. But my goodness, this is such a cohesive record. I love this album. Really glad to see him make the list.
Yeah, yeah, I'm glad to see the weekend represented. And I personally I like After Hours a little bit more. I think maybe on the conceptual level, I feel like what he was doing there was a little more interesting, especially like with the videos he was doing for that record, and kind of the cohesiveness with that kind of character he was playing or whatever. But overall, it's really strong, and yeah, you pretty much said it all, man. So
Mm.
yeah, glad to see him here.
But dude, sonically, this kicks After Hours ass, man. I'm telling you, like, just
Yeah, I need to
from a
listen to
chord
it
progression
again.
standpoint. Oh, you
Yeah,
should, man, because those, especially those two songs, Out of Time and Here We Go Again, just blow my mind from a musical standpoint. Though I could
yeah.
understand someone saying some of the tracks are kind of like generic, because I still feel that way. But the best stuff on here is really just absolutely exceptional.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think I've always, like you said at the beginning, like been a singles guy
yeah.
for the weekend, and I haven't really, like, I haven't loved any of his albums as a whole as of yet, but who maybe I'll get there eventually.
Hey man, I mean, this was the one to me where I was like, yes, I absolutely am glad to say with certainty that I love The Weeknd. And I can't wait. I mean, he says that his next project is going to be The Last is The Weeknd. So I can't
Hmm.
wait to see what Abel does next. Just very interesting guy, really cool guy, and really great artist at that. So awesome choice on this list. And that is going to take us to number 79. By the Time I Get to Phoenix, not by Glenn Campbell, but by Injury Reserve from 2021. Of course, this hip hop trio with producer Parker Corey and rappers Richie with a T and Steppa J. Groggs really broke out on the scene with their early mixtapes, which I've not heard yet, but I hear really great things about. Which I really do want to check out because I love their self-titled debut album. I think that was one of the most interesting and groundbreaking hip hop albums from the past 5 years. And so I was very excited to listen to this when I saw it make the list. And look, I gotta give some credit where credit's due. I mean, you can't deny this is an interesting album at the very least. And I love the experimental, abstract, glitchy beats and production from Corey. I just think it's so well crafted that I gotta give it props at least from that stance. And of course, I mean, the untimely passing of Groggs at age 32 during the middle or right when this album was being recorded was a huge blow. I mean, honestly, he's such a talented dude, and just such a tragic story with him. So obviously dealing with the loss of Groggs, there was a lot of pent up emotion within this now duo, and you can feel it all throughout this album, especially on a track that does feature Groggs. The opening track here, Outside, is absolutely amazing. I absolutely love this song from a sonic standpoint. And Richie with a T, he's almost like having like this civil argument with the speaker on the first half of the song, which is Groggs. And at first I thought it was kind of like maybe a comment on the political, because this came out, or was recorded around the time of the George Floyd incident and all the riots that took place. So I thought maybe they were talking about that, but if you look a little closer, I do think they're talking about Groggs' death. And just the way on the second half where these whirling synths come in, oh my goodness, it's just a mind-blowing track. But I gotta be honest, as much as I do appreciate the production on a lot of this album, I think some of it is just absolutely obnoxious, especially on Superman. That I think the way they utilize the auto tune on that, I'm not a fan at all. I think it's pretty obnoxious, and I think some of these songs I just don't really understand, like, what I think they're a little too abstract for their own good. and I appreciate this album in like portions where it's going. And I really do like the last track, By Storm, which I almost love. But really, I don't know. I'm not really into this sort of style that they're going for, even though I do appreciate some of it. But really, I mean, I don't think this should be on the list. Like, really? I mean, above like D'Angelo and all that stuff. I don't know. Hey,
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly, as I said, something I appreciate, but not something I'm going to spin all the time, especially considering how much I loved their last album.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're actually being kind on this one. Like, just to for me, just file this under like I just don't get it. Like this, I don't see how this is like enjoyable. Like I do see what you mean, like on the production, like there's some interesting things going on, and you can tell, they're trying to be innovative, and maybe they are, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just an old man, I don't get it, but yeah, that's all I have to say about this one.
I'm I might be somewhere in the middle, you know,
Yeah.
the mediator. But I get it. I mean, I'm not a fan of some of the sounds that they're integrating into this record. But really, I think some of the most emotional tracks where they are talking about the loss of Grogs, I think really stands out. Especially, I think it might have been I think it might have been either it might have been postpartum. I think that one really stood out to me as well, or maybe not. I don't know, but I know I didn't like top picks for you that much. I think it was okay. But yeah, certainly didn't like Superman that. But other than that, like I don't know, I dug what they were doing overall, but I don't think it really did much for me besides that opening and closing track. But hey, you gotta respect these guys. I mean, especially pulling through a tragedy like that, and to be able to come up with something that is certainly creative. But I don't know. Is this going to stand the test of time? Who am I to say? We don't know yet, but it's certainly not one I'm going to put money on for the time being. So I don't know if I agree with it being on the list, but certainly not a bad choice. So yeah, guys, that's going to take us to number 78.
Yoshimi battles the Pink Robots by the Flaming Lips. Yeah, Flaming Lips making another one of our lists. They made it with the Soft Bulletin for the 90s countdown. And I really enjoyed that album quite a bit. I had not heard it before. This one I had actually heard before off of their single Do You Realize, which I think is probably the strongest track on here. The Flaming Lips, they're, an interesting indie psych rock band if you don't know them. And they went a little more electronic on this album, which I didn't mind overall. I think it was probably a good move for them. Although, like most of the album, like you would think it's sort of like some kind of concept record, and I think the first few songs kind of are, but you don't really know where it's going after that. Of course, Wayne Cohn is known for just being a little out there overall, but yeah, musically, I mean, it's I don't think it's as good as the Soft Bulletin, but it's a pretty strong outing for them. I know they have quite a few albums. I haven't gotten through all of them yet, but yeah, it's not great. It's not bad. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. I enjoyed it for what it is. I'm not a huge fan, but yeah, I'm not upset with them making the list. I definitely think they deserve to be on here more than Injury Reserve, but that's just me.
That's probably true. At least when we're talking about the last album. Yeah, I mean, as you said, they made the '90s list. I didn't get to them then. I didn't get to them now, which is not to say that I don't want to, but yeah, I've heard a lot about this album. Also, the album cover's amazing. I mean, that's like one of the coolest album covers I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Kind of, I think it's like a Japanese sort of
Hmm.
manga sort of image. But yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot about this album. I hear a lot of people think it's great. So once I get to them, I'm excited to hear it. It's not for necessarily a lack of trying, but a lack of actually getting through and listening to a bunch of other stuff. So
we've
I'll
had
do
a
my due
lot to listen
diligence.
to here lately, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But after this episode, I think it's going to be okay. I think I'll be caught up on everything after this, or at least I hope so.
Right on, man.
All right, well, hey, that's going to take us right now to number 77.
I'm an orange moon.
Mama's Gun by Erykah Badu from 2000. Oh my goodness. Yet again, I'm going to say this. What is this doing this low on the list? Just like with Voodoo, another Neo Soul classic that came out in the same exact year. Maybe the best year for Neo Soul of all time if I had to, take a stab at it. But, as if you remember from the 90s countdown, I love her debut album, Baduism, but I felt like it kind of repeated itself by the end, and so I was kind of like, I can't wait to see what Mama's Gun had in store. And the first couple tracks, I was like, okay, I dig it. I mean, Penitentiary Philosophy is like 6 minutes long, so I was like, okay, this is a little long. And then, of course, the Jay Dilla produced Don't You Know, which, believe it or not, is not my favorite song. I actually don't even love it. But I was like, this is cool. And then once you got to My Life and onwards, I was just like, holy shit, this is one of the greatest albums I've ever heard in my life. And I think a lot of that has to do with, really, she took a step back from the more cryptic lyricism that was present on Baduism, but the lyrics here are more direct, but they're still like incredibly metaphorical and universal at the same time. And while there's, fewer lyrical passages, kind of like how you look at Wish You Were Here, right? Like, there's few lyrics on there, but when you get to them, they are incredible and so impactful. And the soundscapes on this album are just so mind-blowingly good. I just want to live inside them forever. Like, I don't say that about many albums, but some of the synth lines on here, I really think are on par with 1970s Stevie Wonder. Like, I was listening to, I think it was AD 2000, and I just heard that, and I was like, jeez, man. It just absolutely blows my mind how much of a throwback this is, but also so contemporary at the same time. And really just her use of avant jazz, psychedelic funk, and hip hop, obviously, are even taken further than her debut record. And I think, especially for me, I think that she's an incredibly influential artist on myself. I mean, that's a sound I would just love to kind of like incorporate into my own music, which I don't say about, well, I do say about quite a few people, but the fact that I'm mentioning it, I think, says a lot. But so many great tracks on here, especially the beautiful Orange Moon, and just the metaphors she used for the sun and the moon to kind of replicate these two separate souls coming together and conjoining as one. I just think is really probably my favorite Erykah Badu song of all time. My favorite one on here for sure. And even like In Love With You, the duet she has with Stephen Marley is really, really great. Bag Lady is an incredible cautionary tale about letting someone with all this baggage into your life and kind of like thinking that maybe she needs to take a step back and really look at herself before committing to anyone else. And especially songs like Time's a Wasting, man, I really was impressed by, because even though it's kind of like a song geared towards young black men, kind of like referencing the fact that, unfortunately they might be killed at any moment. I still relate it in some way where it's like, time's a wasting. You have to, get on, creating something meaningful and purposeful before your time ends. And I really took that to heart after I had heard this album. I just think it's absolutely incredible. Even like the last song in here, it's 10 minutes long, Green Eyes. It really feels like this beautiful ode to Billie Holiday. Like, it starts off like this kind of like old sounding sort of record player with kind of static, and her vocals are kind of like more crushed down in the mix to make them sound like it from the time, and then it evolves into this beautiful magnum opus. I mean, I could go on and on about how incredible the lyrics are, how personal this album is, how relatable it is. I really think that this is one of the most landmark albums from the 21st century, if you want to say that. And I really am just surprised that it's this low on the list.
Yeah, I mean, she is kind of like a modern day Billie Holiday, and yeah, I'm glad it made the list. It's been a little while since I've listened to it, so I can't quite recall my favorite track. It might have been Times of Wasting now that you talk about it,
Mm.
because I felt like that was a really powerful track. But yeah, it's been a little while since she's done anything, and I'm curious to see if she's got some more stuff coming out soon, because yeah, I think she's definitely one of the most interesting artists in that genre.
Probably the best.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, that's hard to argue. So, yeah, I don't know that I'm surprised that it's this low, but yeah, it could have been a little higher, but I'm glad she's represented nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, especially after some of these other albums we're going to talk about. Oh boy. I mean, but hey, I mean, I'm so glad to see Erica on here. By all accounts, too, just an amazing, amazing human being, and I think that humanity that she has really translates through her art in a very, very meaningful way. Definitely one of my favorite artists. Definitely top 30 for me. I absolutely love this woman and her work. So amazing choice, but as I said, should be a lot higher on this list. This was just outside of my top 10, so I don't know if that tells you how much I love this record, and just outside of my top 50 of all time. But hey, here it is. So yeah, guys, amazing, amazing choice, obviously, and that will take us now to number 76. Yeezus by none other than Kanye West. The first appearance of Kanye West on this list, and I assure you it won't be the last. This is a really interesting album to start off on, I must say, and I really think a turning point for Kanye, and a very prophetic album at that, which we'll get into. But I mean, just the whole story behind this album too, not really the story behind it, but everything surrounding it's very, very interesting, because of course he had producers on there like Daft Punk came in, Guy and Tomas obviously in the studio with him, Mike Dean, the usual suspects in that sense, and of course Kanye. But 15 days before the release date, I guess Rick Rubin came in because Kanye wanted to strip it down so it sounded more minimalist, which I think is very, very interesting, and you can certainly feel that while listening to this album. And I also think another extremely interesting part of the history of this album is this was like one of the last things Lou Reed talked about before he died, and he was like saying
wow.
that, like, yeah, he's like saying there are moments of supreme beauty and greatness on this record, and then some of it's the same old shit. But he says, but the guy really is really, really talented, and he's like, no one's doing what he's doing. It's not even on the same planet. Which, in some ways, I mean, I have to agree with Lou Reed on Kanye in general. I don't know how I feel about that when applied to this album, because I do like this album. It wasn't on my list. I'll say that right off the bat, because there's some truly brilliant stuff, and the way he uses industrial rap in this is very, very interesting. But I think the standout here is really Black Skinhead, which I just think is very prophetic considering what has happened to Kanye
Yeah.
since.
That's him now.
So
Yeah.
yeah, not wrong about that. I also love New Slaves, like just his obviously his critiques and observations about the way blacks are perceived in American society have always been very, very potent. But I don't think none other than on those two songs, especially with that song that features Frank Ocean on vocals. Obviously, always great to have Frank on any record. But besides like that, those songs, and Blood on the Leaves, which is obviously a great standout from this record, you have so many songs that are either completely vapid of lyrical content, like I am a god, I am a god, and songs like that really proved to me like this was kind of where Kanye started truly, because he bought in his own ego on My Beautiful Dark and Twisted Fantasy, right? But he approached it in a way that was extremely interesting musically, and really
And
groundbreaking.
often funny too, like
Yeah, and
kind of
and
poking
then
fun at himself. But here it's
right,
like a little disturbing. Like
yeah,
you're
and
you're
then he
starting to see like the beginning of the end of Mr. West here.
because even with Runaway, it was a very self-critical song, but here, like, he's just saying, like, I'm a god, and then it says, see Jesus, yo, or, like, he says, yo, what's up, Jesus? I'm like, come
Yeah.
on, man. I just,
Yeah,
it's so
it's
stupid.
right.
And you know, other songs like Hold My Liquor and all this stuff, Send It Up, but even Bound 2, which I think is one of the most interesting songs, the way it's chopped, it's just so choppy. You know what I mean? I don't really like the way, like, I appreciate the sounds of industrial rap, but like, what is Kanye doing new on this record that other artists in industrial rap hadn't done? He just made it appeal to the mainstream. Okay, but that doesn't mean he's like doing anything new. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like this album quite a bit. I almost really like this album, but I think it's stuff like that that really holds it back to me, and it's just kind of sad to see, like, after this album, what like, he still made, you know, another great record or so after this, but it's really sad to see what happened to Kanye after this point in his career.
Yeah, especially coming off the heels of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which is tremendous. But this is the first album of his that I couldn't really connect with in any real way.
Yeah, I agree. Well,
Even
to
though,
an
like,
extent.
I appreciate some of the aspects, like on Black Skinhead musically, but yeah, it's like I said, like, just kind of the start of the fall for a lot of people, not just musically, but, you know, just constantly being in the news for the craziest things. And now it's like he's way off the deep end. But yeah,
Canceled.
yeah, I guess so. So yeah, I'm not that surprised this album made it, but I would have been okay if this hadn't made the list personally. I think there's enough room for some of his other stuff, but we'll see what happens. So
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get it. Like, I kind of get why it made the list, but I also wouldn't have been upset. Like, should it be above Mama's Gun? No. I don't think so at all. But I don't know. I guess people still, you know, like it enough to have it voted on this list. I've just never, as much as I do appreciate this album, I've just never understood it quite to that level. But it's certainly better than some of the albums that have already made this episode. I will say. But, you know, certainly not something that I'd have on there, but still not a bad choice at all. So, yeah, guys, that's going to take us now to number 75.
some rap songs by Earl Sweatshirt from 2018. Oh man, where do I begin? This is an album, like, I don't even know how this qualifies to be an album, let alone make the list, because we're talking like less than 25 minutes of runtime. There are 15 tracks on here, which makes the average length of a song like less than 2 minutes. Most of them have no room to go anywhere on that basis. But on top of that, I had not heard any Earl Sweatshirt stuff before. Well, I guess I have, like, on other people's albums, but as a solo artist, I was new to him, and I can't even understand what he's saying on half the time. He's so mumbly, and I don't know. Maybe his lyrics are genius if I can understand what they are, but yeah, this album, I really don't get it how it made the list. My favorite track was probably the last one because
Yeah.
it was Over.
Actually, I do like that track, though. I do
I
like
like
that
the
track.
sample on it as well, but it's like 1 minute long. So yeah, I don't mark this also on my list of things I don't get on this episode. But yeah, that's all I have to say about it.
I've tried, people. I've been trying to be respectful of everybody's opinion on here because we're not always going to be into the same music, and that's understandable to an extent, right? But what the fuck is this doing on this list? I can't understand for the life of me what the appeal of this album is. Okay, maybe he was going for like a lo-fi sound. It doesn't mean that almost every track on here sounds so repetitive. Like, especially the first two songs, which I think are awful. I think some of the most annoying, repetitive, grating samples I've ever heard in my life. And not only that, like, you can't, on some of these songs you can, and I appreciate some of this album, but you can't understand what he's saying half the time because his voice is so low in the mix.
Yeah.
Why would you make a rap album where you can't understand the lyrics? That doesn't make what's the point of rapping then? What the fuck is the point of rapping? Okay, and this is the thing.
I'm glad I was the nice guy on this one.
No,
I thought
this album is not good. This album, I'm sorry. I think you guys are wrong on this one because really, it's just. I mean, look, there are some songs I appreciate, like December 24, which, you know, I know he was going through a lot at this time. Like, his father had passed away, who he wasn't close to. And some of that comes through. I also really, I do like Veins quite a bit, where he's kind of reckoning with his own star status, which is really interesting. Riot 2, I really do love the... it features some incredibly smooth, like, electric guitar sample, you know, complemented by a blasted out horn section, which really I think would have suited this whole album style if Earl had stuck with it for the entire thing. And that's the only song he doesn't rap on. And that's like the best song. And this is the thing that I think is so interesting.
Right there,
yeah, because I think Earl Sweatshirt's a talented dude. Like, he's one of those rappers where I think he's better on other people's songs than his own albums. Because obviously he's had, you know, yeah, he's had some great features on, you know, we were just talking about Pinata. He's great on there. Of course, on, you know, Super Rich Kids off of Channel Orange is a great feature. I really love him on Really Dough off of Atrocity Exhibition. Like, he has so many great features under his belt. But yet, here comes this album. And as you said, the songs are so short. You don't have any time to live with them. Mm-hmm. And even the ones that, thankfully, when it comes to the length of some of these songs, you're just like, okay, I'm glad it's over. Like,
we should have just disqualified it, man.
No, I mean, hey, you guys voted for it, so we have to respect that because it's democracy. But
yes.
This probably is like the worst album on any of these lists. I think this album is not good. It does not deserve to be on this list. And honestly, I mean, what the fuck? I mean, really? This
I feel
album,
like I have to hold you back, or you're over
maybe,
here. Yeah.
but like, dude, like this sounds like unfinished demos that like I could have shit out of my ass in like a month. You know what I mean? Like, it really, like, even if that's what he's going for, like, because Prince, I always come back to this Prince quote, because he says he didn't like the word experimental because it sounded like it wasn't finished. I think this is exactly what he's talking about. Albums like this, and I don't know, like, especially out of the Odd Future guys, I've never understood what the full appeal of Earl Sweatshirt is, you know, especially compared to like Tyler or Frank. I really don't understand. I don't really like Earl Sweatshirt that much, and I think this
I like
album,
his name. That's about it.
It's cool. No, and I'm sure he's a cool dude. I think he's, as I said, he's a talented rapper. I just don't think he's ever utilized himself in a good way. And the fact this is on above Mama's Gun and like Voodoo and Bob Dylan, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Really? Anyway, I refute this album on this list. This is a really bad choice. I'm going to be completely honest with you, but whatever, it made the list. You know, let us know what you get out of this, because I really don't understand it at all. But hey, that's going to take us to number 74 now. So there you go. Schlagenheim by Black Midi from 2019. Oh my goodness. Interesting that this album made the list. This almost made my list myself, but I kind of got phased out for some better albums, if you ask me. But look, this is obviously Black Midi's debut. This post-rock band who's doing some of the craziest stuff I've heard in rock music ever since they hit the scene. And I just think their style is so interesting because they're hitting all these, you know, different styles within one record. I really like a lot of songs in here, like Speedway. Of course, they play around with reggae on, you know, reggae. One of my favorites, though, is Western, which is really a 8-minute long epic that starts out, it almost sounds like a Grateful Dead song at the beginning. And then they just, you know, go off into crazy cacophonous sound. That, you know, kind of heightens the emotional turmoil within that song, and I think that's what Black Midi does best, especially Jordy Greep. I mean, I know his voice isn't going to be for everybody, but the way he's able to rattle off so many things in this very anxiety-ridden way has always been very intriguing. But I will say I really really like this album, but I think sometimes with the vocals, some of his lyrics get a little lost because it's just so much and there's so much going on musically. I don't really think you can fully sink your teeth into this, but I completely understand why this album made the list. Glad to see it above Earl's Sweatshirt at the very least. I wouldn't have it this high, obviously, because it didn't make my list, but it's certainly a respectable choice, and I really think this was the start of something great, and I think even going forward from this point, they've really stepped up their game and continue to create very, very interesting music.
Yeah, I will give it that. It is interesting, and you have to kind of respect their craft.
Oh, yeah.
They are great at what they do musically. It's not quite my taste, although there were a couple of tracks like the ones that you mentioned. Also, I don't know how you pronounce this, but BM. I kind of
Let's say
dug
that's
that one.
safe to think.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, experimental to say the least. But yeah, like for fans of metal mixed with indie, mixed with I don't even know. It's kind of just all over the place to where I just haven't really found a really a strong entry point. There's some other bands out there these days that are like that are interesting, but it's just not my thing. So another one this episode that I wouldn't say like I don't get it, like because I kind of do get what they're going for at least on this one, but yeah, wouldn't have made my list. So
I can respect that take. I mean, I really enjoy what they're doing, and I especially appreciate a lot of things they did later on. So we'll see about that. And yeah, guys, really good choice overall, and that will take us now to number 73. Plastic Beach by Gorillaz from 2010. Wow, the virtual band has made their appearance on this list with what I think is honestly their best record, because I really like Gorillaz. Don't quite love them, but this album I absolutely do love. This made my list probably around the spot, maybe a little bit higher. So I do think this is at a good spot. But my goodness, I think this album really stands out, especially from a conceptual standpoint, especially talking about the environmentalism and everything that goes along with it. Obviously, the album cover, which is so cool. I love that album cover.
yeah.
And the way they're talking about environmental issues. And I absolutely love what they're doing on here. But my goodness, the features on this, like, I never thought I'd hear, and I say this about every Gorillaz record, there's always like a combination of people that show up. I never thought I'd hear Snoop Dogg and Lou Reed on the same record, which is just kind of insane to me, but so
Yeah.
awesome. I mean, especially that track, Welcome to the World of Plastic Beach, Snoop Dogg bringing you this smooth vocals and his laid back style that we have known him for years. I really love White Flag featuring Bashy and Kano, and I just love their British intonation. I think it adds so much. White flag, white flag. I mean, it's just so great hearing the song. But one of my favorite Gorillaz songs of all time is Rhinestone Eyes. Like the gargoyles on the tower. Damon Albarn comes in as what should I say? I forgot the names of the characters, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But just that the synth line on the chord, that electric ick. I mean, oh my goodness, it's just so sticky and it just stays with you, man, long after you listen to it. I think it's one of the most immediate, catchy songs, and lyrically it's really great too. Stylo featuring Mos Def and Bobby Womack. What a combo there on the same song, right? But really, really great track. Yet again, I mean, I could go on and on. I actually, really like Sweepstakes too with Mos Def. I mean, they really got a lot out of him. Some Kind of Nature with Lou. I can't like believe how well they utilized Lou Reed on Some Kind of Nature. It just feels like it feels like an extension of Lou Reed's own catalog, and just hearing his sort of withered voice on this track, it's so awesome. and also, yeah, I mean, on Melancholy Hills, another absolute standout on this record. I really love the sound of this. I think this is really Damon Albarn really came into peak form with this band, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. I still think it's their best record. I think it's a great choice, and I'm really glad to see it on the list.
Yeah, yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with this one. I've never been I haven't really gotten into Gorillaz yet. I haven't listened to many of their albums, and this one I just listened to last week. But yeah, I really appreciated it, especially for the message and how they incorporated and kept that flowing throughout the record. And yeah, some really interesting twists and turns musically. I've never been that big a fan of Damon Albarn's voice, though, and I think that's why I've never kind of
Hmm.
taken the time to jump into some of their albums, but I'm looking forward to getting to know more of their stuff now. I do, like you said, I love the Lou Reed track. I thought that was really fun. Of course, Snoop Dogg. I love Mos Def, and I wish he was actually even more utilized on here because I felt like he was almost just in the background on some of the stuff that he was on. But yeah, really, really good choice, guys. One of the only really good choices from this episode, in my opinion.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I suppose it's one of the
yeah,
only three ones that I love.
right,
I'll give
yeah,
you that much. But really, I think their brand of trip hop I think really was perfected on this album in a way that feels conceptual. That feels really digestible, and it's funny talking about digestible because of course that De La Soul feature that they had on here for super fast jellyfish, which almost yeah,
yeah.
anyway. I don't know if I'm getting this right because I thought it was about food, but I might be right. Right? It was like about fast food or whatever.
Yes,
I'm
that's the
pretty sure.
one.
Okay, so I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
right.
yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway, I still really think that this is the best that Damon Albarn has done with this band, and honestly, once again, really glad to see it on the list. So yeah, guys, that's going to take us now to number 72.
Songs for the Deaf by Queens of the Stone Age from 2002. Their big breakout album, mainly for the song that everyone knows, which is called No One Knows, which is, really great guitar riff. Even if it gets a little repetitive, it's one that like it just gets stuck in your head. And of course, the great drumming by the master Dave Grohl, who plays throughout most of this record, which is probably one of the best parts of this album because
Yeah.
for me, I don't know, Josh Homme is like I like his voice, but I feel like after a while it kind of grates on me. And I think this album is a little long at 60 plus minutes. And I do love when he collaborates with Grohl. I actually, them Crooked Vultures did make my list. This did not. But for those who don't know, that's like kind of another side supergroup with him, Dave Grohl, and John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin.
Oh wow.
And that in my mind blows this out of the water. It's like so freaking great from 2009. So if you haven't
Well,
listened to
dude,
that, check it out. But
you you say John Paul Jones, and I'm like, wow, I'm in.
yeah, oh dude, and he's like the MVP of that album. But yeah, this I can see why it made the list because they're a beloved hard rock band that um you know they're good, but I just don't think they're as great as a lot of people do. I wouldn't have had it this high at least, but it's good to see some hard rock represented here. But yeah, that's all I
Yeah,
got.
I mean, I'm kind of with you in a lot of ways because when I was first listening, besides "No One Knows," which I think is obviously a highlight, I mean, one of their best songs for sure. I was really like what is it? Like I've heard their first couple of albums, I can hear the appeal a little bit, but I'm really like, what is it about this band that is really really groundbreaking and incredible? Because obviously I don't necessarily agree about Josh Homme. I do like his voice. Really, it's Nick Oliveri. Whenever he's like starts screaming, I'm just get checked out. I don't like those songs.
Yeah.
And I think Josh Homme is a cool guitarist. There's some really heavy stuff on here, but yeah, it feels like it goes on forever a lot of time. But once I got to what was it? God is in the radio.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, whoa, man! Like that. Honest, that's like definitely one of my favorites on this album. And the riff is like
That's a good
it's
one,
very.
yeah.
Yeah, man, it's so heavy. And it's very reminiscent of Revolution by the Beatles. That was like the first thing I thought of when I heard it. But my goodness, what a great blistering track. I love that song. But I think it really comes together by the end. And obviously, the drumming from Dave Grohl, I mean, obviously helps a lot. I mean, what do you expect at this point? I mean, he's one of the best drummers ever. But my goodness, I think the hidden track on here, Mosquito Song, might
Oh
be
yeah,
my favorite. Dude, like the way
yeah.
they implement accordions, and then the piano, and then the strings come in, the horns, and there's like a flamenco style guitar, which I believe was played by Dean Ween, who was also a guest instrumentalist on here.
They're
But my
very
goodness,
talented dudes. Yeah.
oh yeah, dude, and I just think that musical style, like they really felt adventurous in a way that a lot of these other songs did not, and it felt like they droned on a while, like maybe I'm doing for this episode. I don't know, but I think that this album, it's pretty good. I think the songs near the end of the album really save it from some of the ridiculous screaming. Also, I really loved, as much as I said Oliveri's voice bothered me, I really loved Another Love Song. That was another one of my favorites near the tail end of this album, because he sings in a more digestible tone and register, and it
Right.
really was a nice love song. So yeah, I mean, I kind of get the appeal of this album. This is definitely their best album that I've heard, but I don't know, for me that's not saying much. I'm not entirely into them, but I can certainly like understand some of the appeal, especially once we got to the end of this album. I was like, okay, I kind of see where you guys are coming from. But would I put it on my list? No. Would I have it above some of these other albums on the list? Probably not. Actually, definitely not. But still, it's a quality record. It's definitely better than some of the albums in this episode. So I can give you.
Sweatshirt.
Well, we don't have to keep bringing it up. I think they know. But hey, not a bad choice at all. So there you go, you Queen of the Stone Age fans represented on the list. And yeah, guys, that is going to take us now to number 71.
Hail to the Thief by Radiohead from 2003. Yes, the savior of this episode. Finally, a great album that I can get behind on this episode from start to finish. I mean, it's Radiohead. Now, is it in my top 5 of their albums? No, but it is still just one of their greatest outings, from the opening track of 2 + 2 = 5, where you get just a little bit of that Kid A and Amnesiac kind of synthy thing going on in the beginning with the guitar, but then, man, this rocks out. I remember when this came out, they were saying like the return of the Benz and OK Computer era Radiohead, and there is a lot more guitar on this album. However, it's a great mixture of everything they had done to that point. You've got amazing ballads like Sail to the Moon, which is just, I think, one of the most beautiful songs on here. You've got rockers like Go to Sleep and There There. You've got the more experimental synthy tracks like The Gloaming, which are really interesting. Not my favorites on here, but there's a little bit of everything to love on here. I especially love the closing track, A Wolf at the Door, which is kind of a different thing for them. Like, it almost feels like Tom York is rapping on that song a little bit. Really interesting. Of course, his super great falsetto throughout the whole album on songs like I Will. A Punch Up at a Wedding also has a really cool groove to it. My favorite track on here is Where I End and You Begin, which I think is just incredible, especially when you see them perform it live. And then it has that weird thing at the end where he's like, I will eat you alive. I will eat you alive. Gotta love it, man. It's freaking Radiohead doing what they do best. And yeah, hail to the thief.
Oh, it's good. It's good. Well, I will say this. I think the best album on this episode is Mama's Gun, if I didn't make that clear enough. I certainly
You
wouldn't put
made
it
it
above
clear.
that. Yeah, I probably wouldn't put it above Dawn FM or Plastic Beach either. This did not make my list, but yet again, as you said, it's Radiohead. You know it's going to be good. I'm not too familiar with this one as opposed to some of their other albums, but I really also want to mention like the political nature of this album as well. I think this was one of the first times I think really Tom York is kind of tackling lyrically, kind of protesting the Iraq War a little bit on this album, which I think is really interesting and kind of cool. Which obviously we'd see them, do some more protest stuff like on a Moon-Shaped Pool and so on and so forth. But yeah, I don't know. This one's never fully stood out to me. Like I think it's, as you said, yes, it is that bridging point, like after Amnesiac. I don't think it's quite as good as Amnesiac, certainly nowhere near as good as Kid A, but I think they'd even take it a step further with bridging that gap on their next album. But yeah, I mean, this is a solid choice. I certainly agree with you. It's one of the better choices on this album, what am I talking about, on this episode. But yeah, guys, I mean, first appearance of Radiohead on this list, and certainly won't be the last. We can certainly tell you that much. But yeah, I mean, a good choice nonetheless. And yeah, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Are you mad at me for going off on Earl's sweatshirt? Let me know. And I hope you guys enjoyed this regardless. And I hope you'd enjoyed these picks on this episode. And of course, I wouldn't expect you to be new here, but if you are, you gotta subscribe to Johnny Radio, because the next episode's going to be back on his channel, then back to mine, so on and so forth, until we wrap this whole shindig up. Of course, always a pleasure, my friend, doing this with you, as always.
Always, my friend. It's a blast. Whether we like things, whether we agree or disagree, it's always fun talking about this stuff with you, man. So can't wait to see where we go from here.
Absolutely. So yeah, guys, stay tuned for the next episode, and of course, smash the like button, subscribe to this channel as well. A lot of great content coming soon. Of course, my review for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It's finally here. I'll be dropping this weekend, so please stay tuned for that. Yeah, guys, and until the next video, take it easy now, and we'll see you later.
Peace.
It's like a dream, what she feels with me. She loves